Have you ever found yourself thinking, we're not miserable, but we're not really happy? Maybe you're getting along, you're raising your kids, you're paying the bills, you're going on vacations, you're doing everything that a couple is supposed to be doing. But somewhere along the way, the relationship started feeling more like a partnership for survival than a place where either one of you truly feels alive. The biggest threat to your relationship isn't fighting, it's settling. Because relationships, they rarely fall apart overnight. They slowly lose emotional safety. They lose curiosity. They lose friendship. They lose laughter. They lose passion. And before either person realizes what's happening, one day someone quietly just says, I love you, but I'm not in love with you anymore. And the tragedy is that most couples don't lose each other because they stopped loving each other. They lose each other because they got to this place where they slowly stopped investing in the things that helped them thrive. They got so busy surviving life that they forgot to nurture the relationship that was supposed to be the one that makes life worth living. So today I want to share something with you. The 5 things that I consistently see in couples who don't just stay together. They build relationships where both people feel emotionally safe, deeply connected, and genuinely excited to keep choosing each other. Those couples, they're not lucky, they're intentional. And the good news is these are habits that every one of us can learn. If we haven't met, I'm Jenn Pinkerton. And I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm a psychotherapist. I'm also a clinical sexologist, and I am a connection expert. I help individuals and couples build healthier, more connected relationships. Today, I'm going to walk you through 5 practical ways to stop merely surviving your relationship or your marriage and start creating one where both of you can truly thrive. So not long ago, I was sitting with a couple in my office, and this couple, they had been married for over 20 years, and they weren't on the brink of divorce per se, but there hadn't been an affair. There wasn't like addiction. There wasn't constant fighting. In fact, they described themselves as fine, okay. But as we talked, the wife quietly shared something. She looked at me and then she looked at her husband and she said, I don't want to leave you, but I don't remember the last time I truly enjoyed being married. And the room was pretty quiet in that moment. Her husband looked completely blindsided. He said, but we don't fight. We have a good life together. We travel. The kids are doing well. We have great holidays. I thought we were okay. And that's exactly the problem. They were okay. They had built a life that looked successful from the outside, but neither of them felt deeply connected to each other anymore. And every conversation had become about logistics, what I call the business of marriage. Who's picking up the kids? Did you pay that bill? What's for dinner? What time is your meeting? Where are we going to next? Did you call the contractor? Their relationship had become incredibly efficient and streamlined, but they had stopped being intentional about each other. They were surviving life together, but they had stopped creating a relationship that actually gave them life. I see this every single week because most relationships don't implode because of one big catastrophic event. They slowly drift, not because 2 people stop loving each other, but because they stop nurturing the friendship, the emotional safety, the curiosity, the passion, the appreciation, the playfulness, and the intimacy that made them fall in love in the first place. The beautiful thing is that thriving isn't reserved for just a lucky few. It isn't about finding the perfect partner because, newsflash, there is no perfect partner. It's about learning different habits because couples that I see that are genuinely thriving, they are not necessarily the ones with the fewest problems. They're just the ones who intentionally choose to build a relationship worth coming home to. So today I want to teach you 5 of those habits. If I could only teach couples one thing, just one single thing that would dramatically improve their relationship, it would be this: create emotional safety. It's that simple, because every healthy relationship is built on it. It is the very foundation. And when people think about thriving relationships, they usually think about things like communication, trust, intimacy, romance, or even great sex. And yes, all those things matter, but none of them can consistently flourish if emotional safety is absent, if it doesn't exist. So think about it this way. When you don't feel emotionally safe, you naturally start protecting yourself. You stop sharing. You stop bringing up difficult conversations because you don't want another argument. You avoid conflict at all costs. And the cost is this vulnerability. You stop sharing your insecurities because you're afraid they'll be dismissed. You stop expressing your needs because you're tired of feeling like you're asking for too much. You stop initiating affection because rejection hurts. And little by little, you begin editing yourself. Not because you don't love your partner, but because your nervous system has learned that vulnerability feels risky. And one of the big misconceptions that I hear is we don't fight very often, so we must have a really healthy, good relationship. Not necessarily. Sometimes the absence of conflict isn't peace at all, it's avoidance. And one or both people have simply decided that staying quiet feels safer than being honest. And that's not emotional safety at all. That's emotional self-protection or self-abandonment. Thriving couples don't avoid difficult conversations. They've learned how to stay connected during conflict, how to have them without making each other the enemy. They understand that every conflict presents two opportunities. You can either protect your position and build your wall, or you can protect your connection and let it down. And the healthiest couples choose connection first. That's why I often say connection first, correction second. Because once your partner's nervous system feels attacked, criticized, judged, dismissed, or misunderstood, then you've already lost the conversation. And at that point, you're no longer talking to each other's hearts. You're really just talking to each other's defenses. So instead of curiosity, you get certainty. And instead of empathy, you get explanations. And instead of accountability, well, you get defensiveness. And instead of closeness, you're going to get anything but. You'll get distance. Emotional safety doesn't mean you never disagree. It means both people know that even when you do, even when conflict happens, the relationship itself remains intact. It remains emotionally secure. This sounds like, help me understand. Tell me more. I can see why that hurt you. That wasn't my intention, but I understand that that was the impact. We're on the same team. Those simple statements calm the nervous system because they communicate something that every human being deeply longs to know. You're safe with me. And I have watched thousands of couples over the years, and I have never once seen a thriving relationship that didn't have emotional safety at its core. The happiest couples aren't perfect. They're not great communicators. They're safe communicators. They created an environment where both people feel seen, heard, respected, valued, and emotionally protected. Because once emotional safety exists, trust grows. Intimacy grows, friendship grows, sex improves, conflict becomes productive, repair becomes so much easier, and both people began showing up as their healthiest self instead of their most protective self. So everything else we're going to talk about today is built on this first habit, this first tip. And without emotional safety, relationships will only just survive. With emotional safety, relationships have the opportunity to thrive. So if you're wondering whether your relationship feels emotionally safe and whether, you are unknowingly slipping into survival mode, I want you to take my free Pinkerton Relational Health Index, or otherwise known as the PRHI. Think of it as an owner's manual for your relationship. It measures the core areas that determine whether you're building this emotional safety and trust and intimacy and friendship and long-term connection, or maybe whether your relationship is simply getting through the day, going through the motions. And the link is below. So take the quiz and find out where your relationship is thriving, where you stand, where you might be struggling, so you can begin to build a relationship that you both deserve. So now we're going to go into lesson 2 here, tip 2. And this is about thriving couples, and they stay curious longer than they stay certain. Because one of the quickest ways to stop thriving in a relationship is to become absolutely convinced that you already know why your partner did what they did. The moment we become certain, we stop being curious. We stop asking questions. We stop being open-minded, and we stop trying to understand. Instead, we create our story in our head. You ignored me because you don't care about me. You forgot because I'm not important. You're quiet because you're pulling away from me. These are certainties that you've just decided is your truth. You're defensive because you're guilty. But the problem is that our brains are constantly trying to make sense of other people's behavior. And when we don't have enough data or enough information, we just fill in the blanks. And unfortunately, those blanks are often filled with our own deepest fears and insecurities rather than the truth. And this is where attachment wounds quietly begin running the relationship. If you've experienced rejection or abandonment or criticism or inconsistency in the past, your brain is not just going to react to your partner's behavior. It is instead going to react to every painful experience that behavior reminds you of, that it represents. And that's why I always encourage couples to ask themselves this: am I responding to what my partner actually did, or to the story in my head, the story that my nervous system is creating about what it means? Those are two very different things. Thriving couples don't assume intent. They investigate it. They become students of each other. They want to learn. And instead of being prosecutors building a case against one another. So think about how different these two conversations really sound. The first person says, why would you do that? Why would you do that to me? You never think about anyone but yourself. And the second person says, help me understand what was happening for you, because I'm realizing that I'm making up a story right now and I don't want to assume it's true. Which conversation do you think leads to connection, leads to forward motion? Curiosity lowers all defensiveness. Judgment raises it. And one of the simplest but most transformative questions that you can ask your partner is, can you help me understand? This is not because you're gathering evidence. This is because you're genuinely trying to understand their experience, to understand the person you love. And I tell couples all the time that understanding doesn't require agreement. Validation doesn't mean you're admitting your partner is right. Validation simply says this: I can understand how you got there. And that's a very different thing from saying, I would have done the same thing. When people feel understood, something incredible happens inside of the nervous system. The body begins to settle and calm. You feel peace, and the need to defend decreases. And people often become more open to hear each other's perspectives because they no longer feel like they have to fight to be understood. Now, this is also where I encourage couples to go to the feeling. You'll hear me say that so often, instead of staying stuck in the facts. Now, facts are important, but facts rarely heal relationships. Feelings do. So instead of arguing over whether your partner has a right to feel what they feel or whether the partner remembered to text you at 3 o'clock or 3:15, ask yourself, what feeling am I trying to communicate under this? Because maybe it isn't about the text message at all. Maybe the feeling is, I felt forgotten. I felt unimportant. I felt alone. Well, those are conversations that create intimacy. You give your partner a chance to show up for you because facts invite a debate. Feelings invite connection. And thriving couples know that every difficult conversation presents two choices. You can spend all of your energy over here trying to prove your perspective, or you can spend your energy over here trying to understand your partner's experience. The happiest couples I know almost always choose understanding first. And that's not because they're weak. That's not because they avoid accountability. It's because they've learned something incredibly powerful. Being understood changes people far more often than being corrected. When two people consistently choose curiosity over certainty, they create a relationship where both people continue feeling seen, valued, and emotionally known. That's not surviving. That's thriving. So now we're going to get into our third lesson, our third tip. And this is about that you can't stop dating each other. So one of the biggest lies couples believe is that connection should just happen naturally, but it doesn't. Connection's created. In the beginning of a relationship, we naturally prioritize each other. We ask all these questions, we flirt, we laugh, we hold hands, we plan dates, we notice little things. We're so curious about each other's dreams and fears and favorite foods and childhood stories and what makes each other come alive. But then life happens. Time gets in the way. Work gets busy. Children arrive. Responsibilities pile up and stress becomes constant. So then, without even realizing it, we slowly stop doing the very things that made us feel connected in the first place. So one day you're dating each other, and then a few years later, you're simply managing a household together. And that's why I tell couples something that I think surprises them. You let me know on this. But your relationship isn't starving because you don't love each other. It's starving because you've stopped feeding it. So think about any area of your life. If you stopped exercising, your body would change. If you stopped watering your plants would die. If you stopped showing up at work, you would eventually get fired. You would lose your job. Relationships are no different, but yet we don't seem to understand the correlation. Whatever you stopped investing in eventually begins to deteriorate. And thriving couples understand that love is not sustained by good intentions. It's actually sustained by intentional behaviors. They don't wait until they feel connected to pursue each other. They pursue each other so they can stay connected. And that difference is important. That might look like sitting outside together after dinner without your phones. That might be taking a walk instead of watching another episode on TV together. Sending a text in the middle of the day that simply says, I was thinking about you, or I love you. Giving your partner a 6-second kiss before leaving work. Asking, what's been on your mind lately? Not because you're trying to solve or fix anything, but because you're trying to know them. And one of my favorite questions to ask couples is this. If I followed you around with a camera for the next 2 weeks, would I have enough evidence to know that you're actively pursuing each other? Most people tell me, no, because I'm not looking for them living together or parenting together or paying bills together. I'm talking about pursuing each other because those are completely different things. Thriving couples understand this. They understand something incredibly important. Your partner changes. That's a fact. You change. That's a fact. The relationship changes. That's a fact. That means you never finish getting to know each other. You're either continually in the process discovering who your partner is, what they're thinking, what they're becoming, understanding them, or you're just loving an outdated version of them that no longer exists. And that's why curiosity has to continue long after the honeymoon phase. I still encourage couples who have been married for maybe 30 plus years to ask each other questions like they're on a first date. What's been bringing you joy lately? What are you excited about? What's something you've been worried about that maybe I don't know? What's a dream you haven't even shared with me? What's on your bucket list we haven't talked about? What's one way I could love you better this month, this week, or today? Those questions create emotional intimacy. And emotional intimacy is the very bridge to physical intimacy. And people rarely feel deeply desired by someone who no longer seems to be interested in them, interested in knowing them. So remember this, thriving couples don't accidentally stay connected. They intentionally create moments, these moments of connection that have the opportunity to grow. Because at the very end of the day, your relationship isn't built during your annual vacation or your Christmas holiday. It's built in the ordinary moments when you consistently choose each other over and over again. That's how relationships stop surviving and now begin to thrive. So we're going into lesson 4 now, and this is about repair, because you have to repair more than you keep the score. And one of the biggest myths about healthy relationships is that thriving couples don't hurt each other. Of course they do. They misunderstand each other. They forget important things. They're going to hurt people's feelings. They become defensive. They say things that they wish they could take back. And they disappoint one another because they're human. You know, the difference isn't that thriving couples make fewer mistakes. The difference is that they repair those mistakes before resentment has a chance to take hold. I've often said that relationships, they don't usually end because of one big devastating event. They end because of thousands of tiny moments that never got repaired. A sarcastic comment that never received an apology, maybe. A disappointment that was never acknowledged. A hurt feeling that was dismissed. All of those instead of validating. Or a conflict maybe that ended with both people walking away believing that they had to protect themselves instead of connect with their partner. So every one of those moments, that leaves a tiny crack in the foundation of that relationship. And one crack doesn't destroy a relationship, of course not. But years of unrepaired cracks eventually do. And that's why repair is one of the greatest predictors of long-term relationship success. Repair says our relationship is more important than my ego. And one of the biggest barriers to repair is something I talk about all the time. The DDDEP, defend, deny, deflect, explain, and prove. And when we feel criticized, our nervous system naturally wants to protect. And we defend our intentions. We explain why we did what we did. We prove that we weren't trying to hurt our partner. And the problem is that while we're so busy doing all those things, protecting ourselves, our partner is still sitting there feeling hurt. So one of the greatest gifts that you can give to your relationship is learning to pause before you defend yourself. So instead of saying, that is not what I meant, or that is not what happened, try saying, tell me more about what that felt like for you. Instead of saying, you're overreacting, try saying, I can see that this really hurt you. Notice that neither of those responses requires you to agree with them. I'm not asking you to agree with everything your partner believes, but you can go to the feeling while disagreeing. They simply communicate, your emotional experience matters to me. And that's what repair sounds like. Repair also means becoming comfortable saying words that many people struggle to say. I was wrong. I didn't realize how that affected you. If I could do that over again, I would. Or how can I help make this better? How can I make it right? Because do you know what all those words communicate? Safety, humility, accountability, partnership. They tell your partner, I care more about healing this relationship than protecting my pride. And the strongest relationships I've ever seen aren't made up of people who never fail each other. They're made up of people who become incredibly skilled at finding their way back to one another. Because every repair sends this important message to the nervous system. We're okay. We're still on the same page. We're on the same team. This relationship is safe enough to come back together. And every time that happens, trust grows a little stronger. Not because conflict has disappeared, but because connection became stronger than the conflict. And that's what thriving relationships do. They do not pretend hurt never happened. They do not sweep it under the rug. They repair it before resentment has a chance to become the story of the relationship. So this leads us into the fifth lesson. Thriving couples wake up every day asking, how can I make your life better? So if I asked you what makes someone a great spouse, you might say they're loyal, they're kind, they're honest, they're trustworthy, they're affectionate, supportive. Okay, well, all those things matter. But after working with thousands of couples, I've come to believe that there's another question that quietly determines, whether this relationship simply survives or truly thrives. It's this. When was the last time you intentionally tried to make your partner's life easier? Not because they earned it, not because they deserved it, not because they asked, not because you expected something in return. Just simply because you love them. Thriving couples stop keeping score. They stop asking who did more today, who apologized last, whose turn is it? Instead, they begin asking, how can I serve this relationship today? Now, let me be clear. I am not talking about becoming a doormat. I'm not talking about abandoning yourself or carrying the entire emotional burden or load of the relationship. Healthy relationships require this mutuality. Both people should be moving towards one another. Both people should saying, how do I serve my partner? Because thriving couples develop what I call a culture of generosity. They're constantly looking for opportunities to lighten each other's load. And maybe it's bringing home your partner's favorite coffee. Maybe it's taking something off their plate before they even have to ask. Maybe it's putting your phone down when they start talking. Maybe it's noticing they've had a difficult day and saying, tell me about it. I'm here. I'm right here listening. Those moments seem so small, but they send a powerful message. You matter to me. And one of the biggest shifts I see in thriving relationships is that both people stop asking, am I getting enough? And instead they start asking, am I giving the kind of love I hope to receive? And that's a completely different posture. Because here's what happens in struggling relationships. Both people are standing there, emotionally empty, saying, you go first. Meet my needs first. Love me first. Appreciate me first. Thriving couples flip that script. They understand that generosity is contagious. Kindness is contagious. Gratitude is contagious. And affection, most of all, is contagious. When one person constantly moves towards the relationship instead of away from the relationship, it invites the other person to move towards it too. And over time, this beautiful thing begins to happen. The relationship itself becomes a refuge instead of another source of stress. Home becomes the place where your nervous system can finally exhale. You become each other's safest place, not because life stopped being hard, but because you stopped facing life as two individuals keeping score. And instead, you started facing it as one team. When couples ask me, what's the secret to a thriving relationship? My answer is always surprisingly simple. Never stop asking yourself, how can I make the person that I love feel more loved today? Because thriving isn't built on these grand, big romantic gestures. It's built in ordinary moments of intentional love, repeated over thousands of ordinary days. And that's what creates an extraordinary marriage. So if today's conversation made you realize that you have been surviving instead of thriving, I want you to know that it doesn't have to stay that way. And that's exactly why I created my Relationship Blueprint Intensive. So whether you're an individual wanting to break these unhealthy patterns or relationship dynamics, or maybe you're a couple who is hearing this and it resonates and you want to reconnect, I have a 30-day transformational program, and it gives you this owner's manual that most of us were never taught. We're going to work together on emotional safety, communication, nervous system work, conflict repair, regulation, intimacy, understanding fantasies, desires, staying connected during conflict, and rebuilding trust and creating a relationship where both people can truly thrive. So if you're ready to stop repeating old patterns and start building the relationship that maybe you have always wanted, I'm going to put the information in the description below. So parting thought here is, at the end of your life, your partner won't remember every vacation you took. They're not going to remember every promotion that you received. And they won't remember how clean the house was or how perfectly you managed your calendar. They'll instead remember how they felt when they were with you. Did they feel emotionally safe? Did they feel deeply known? Did they feel chosen? Did they feel like your favorite person? Because surviving a relationship simply means staying together, right? Thriving means creating a relationship where both people become healthier because they loved each other. And that's the kind of love worth building. In the next video, we're going to talk about one of the most overlooked, maybe, relationship issues. This is a dynamic that I see all the time, probably every week in my therapy office, and that is weaponized incompetence versus overfunctioning. One partner is slowly starting to do everything, and the other slowly starts to do less. Neither one intended for it to happen this way, but over time, resentment quietly replaces romance, and appreciation turns into frustration, and the relationship begins to feel much more like a parent-child, mommy-child dynamic than an equal partnership. So if you've ever felt like you're carrying that emotional, mental, or physical load of your relationship, or maybe you've been told that you don't do enough, you are not going to want to miss that next conversation. I'll see you in the next one. Rest and rest.